Amaka's hands trembled as she read the message from Emeka again. Tomorrow, 10 a.m. Don't forget the money, or I'll tell him everything. Her heart pounded so hard, it felt like it would burst out of her chest. She had been living a lie for many years, but now it was all catching up with her. And the worst part was, tomorrow was also the day of the DNA test that her husband Chinedu had insisted on. Trapped on all sides, she didn't know how she was going to get through this. Amaka felt powerless as she sat down in her opulent living room, confused and sad. She couldn't remember the last time she had felt peace. Her life seemed perfect on the outside. Married to Chinedu, a successful businessman who provided everything she and their 3 children could ever need. They lived in a beautiful house in the city, surrounded by all the comforts money could buy. But inside, Amaka was falling apart. It wasn't supposed to be this way. She had once been madly in love with Chinedu. They had met through mutual friends, and from the moment she saw him, she knew he was the one. He was tall, handsome, and driven. A man who knew what he wanted and went after it. They had a whirlwind romance, and before she knew it, they were married. Chinedu's businesses continued to grow exponentially, and he quickly became one of the most respected businessmen in Lagos. But with success came long hours, business trips, and weeks where she barely saw him. Amaka found herself alone more often than not. Yes, she had all the comforts money could buy. She lived in a large mansion with many servants. Her closets were filled with designer brands, and she was the envy of everyone. Many ladies wished they were in her shoes, but she was lonely, very lonely. She wanted her husband to be with her, take her to dinner, spend time with her. This was not the dream she had longed for. She longed for love and affection so bad that she felt she was going crazy. It was during one of these lonely periods that she reconnected with Emeka, her old boyfriend from university. Emeka had always been her what if, the one who got away. He was charming and easygoing, a stark contrast to Chinedu's focused and driven nature. She met Emeka by chance one day when she went shopping. She couldn't believe it. She had not seen him for years, and yet here he was, looking all handsome and charming. Her heart tugged at her, all the emotions suddenly coming to the surface. Her heart was beating wildly. This was her old love, and from the way she was feeling, it seemed that that love was still alive in her heart. Emeka invited her for a drink, just as friends. He insisted that he wanted to catch up on old times. He was not making any passes, and Amaka obliged, of course. After all, she had nothing else to do. That one drink turned to 2, and then to 10, and before you could say what's up, what started as casual meetings soon turned into something much more dangerous. Of course, Amaka felt guilty to be cheating on her husband with Emeka. But she justified it by saying that her husband was too busy for her anyway, and she had feelings. She quenched every guilty feeling that came and concentrated on just having fun. This was the most fun she had had since she got married, and she was not going to let it go. No, not for anything. Until one day when she realized she was pregnant. Amaka still remembered the day she realized she was pregnant for the first time. She was filled with guilt and shame, knowing the child wasn't Chinedu. But Chinedu had been happy when she told him of the news. He had cradled her belly, made all kinds of plans for their future, completely oblivious of the truth. That was when she had made the decision that she would keep this secret, bury it deep, and make sure no one, especially Chinedu, ever found out. The only person she told was Emeka, who was not interested in the baby anyway. He was content with just being in love with Amaka and spending time with her. Or so he said. Then came the second pregnancy, and the third. Each time, Amaka suspected that Emeka was the father, but Chinedu believed that those children were his. He adored them, provided for them, and doted on them in the rare moments when he wasn't busy or traveling. He was still too busy to spend enough time with his wife, but Amaka no longer cared about that. Amaka told herself that as long as everyone was happy, it didn't matter. No one needed to know the truth. But deep down, her guilt chewed at her. She just prayed that nothing would go wrong. As you are enjoying the story, don't forget to like the video and leave a comment, while you also subscribe to the channel to stay updated with the amazing stories we share on this channel. Now back to the story. It was about a month ago when everything started to fall apart. Chinedu had come home one day with a story. He told Amaka about a business associate whose life had been ruined after taking a DNA test. The man found out that none of his children were biologically his, and his wife had been unfaithful to him for years. Chinedu shook his head and chuckled. Can you imagine raising children that aren't even yours? Amaka's heart sank. She had smiled weakly, trying to hide her fear. But since that day, Chinedu had become obsessed with the idea of DNA test. He would bring it up casually at dinner, while they were watching TV, or during car rides. You know, it would be interesting to see if our kids took after me or you more, he would say, always with a smile. I've been thinking about doing one of those DNA tests. Each time he mentioned it, Amaka felt like she was going to faint. She would laugh it off, change the subject, or tell him it wasn't necessary. But Chinedu didn't drop the idea. He just kept bringing it up, as if he was testing her reaction. And then, last week, he dropped the bombshell. I've scheduled the DNA test for next week, he said casually, one evening after dinner. It's no big deal, just something I've been meaning to do. I thought it would be fun. Fun? Amaka wanted to scream, but instead she had nodded, her mind racing with panic. For the past week, Amaka had barely slept. She tossed and turned every night, her thoughts consumed by the impending DNA test. Her children noticed her anxiety, asking if she was okay, but she just smiled and assured them that she was fine. Even Chinedu, who was normally so observant, seemed oblivious to her distress. He went about his life as usual, coming home late as usual, kissing the kids goodnight and pretending like nothing was wrong. But Amaka knew everything was wrong. The walls were closing in on her and she had no way out. That was when Emeka's message came. I need the money, Amaka, Emeka had said over the phone, his voice cold and unfeeling. If you don't give me what I'm asking for, I'll tell Chinedu everything. I'll tell him that those kids are mine. As if the impending DNA test was not enough, Emeka had started blackmailing her. At first, it was a little request for money here and there, but his requests were getting too frequent, and he was asking for larger and larger sums of money. On top of that, he was not as caring again as before. It seems that the Emeka she was seeing now was a completely different person. Amaka had tried to reason with him, tried to beg him for more time, but Emeka was relentless. I've been quiet for too long, he said. I've waited for too long, but I'm tired of waiting. Give me the money or I'll ruin your life. She had no choice. She had some money, but the amount Emeka was asking for was too much. She did not have that amount of money. Chinedu controlled all the finances, but she could not ask him for such a sum of money with no reason. He would be suspicious, but she knew his signature well enough to forge it. It wasn't something she wanted to do, but what choice did she have? If Chinedu found out the truth, she would lose everything: her marriage, her home, her children. The plan was simple. Emeka had demanded the money by 10 a.m. tomorrow. Coincidentally, that was the same day as the DNA test. So Amaka had planned to meet Emeka early in the morning, give him the money, and then somehow get through the test without falling apart. It wasn't a great plan, but it was the only one she had. The night before the test, Amaka lay awake in bed, her heart racing. She could not sleep, and these days she hardly ate. Every possible scenario played out in her mind. What if Chinedu already knew? What if Emeka showed up at the house and told him everything? What if the test results came back and exposed her lies? The thoughts went on and on. She turned to look at Chinedu, who was fast asleep beside her. His face was calm, peaceful, completely unaware of the storm brewing beside him. For a moment, she felt a pang of guilt. Chinedu didn't deserve all this. He had been nothing but good to her, and she had betrayed him in the worst possible way. But she had come too far to turn back now. The next morning, Amaka felt like she was walking in a daze. She had barely slept, and her head pounded with anxiety. She met Emeka at a small cafe on the outskirts of the city, handing him the money in a small black knapsack. Emeka grinned as he took it from her, his eyes gleaming with satisfaction. "You're making the right choice," he said smugly. "Don't worry, I won't say a word." Amaka said nothing. She couldn't look at him. She couldn't believe she had gotten herself into this situation. After a few minutes, she stood up and left, her legs feeling weak beneath her. Back at home, Chinedu was already waiting for her. "Are you ready to go?" he asked, smiling as he gathered the children for the trip to the clinic. Amaka forced a smile and nodded. Her hands were trembling, but she tried to hide her fear. Chinedu, as usual, seemed oblivious. At the clinic, they were greeted by a friendly nurse who took them through the process. It was simple enough, just a few swabs from the kids, Chinedu and Amaka herself. The whole thing was over in less than an hour, but to Amaka, it felt like an eternity. Afterwards, they went home, and Chinedu acted like everything was normal. He played with the kids, made small talk with her, and didn't seem the least bit worried. Amaka, on the other hand, was falling apart inside. The results would take 2 weeks to come in, and she wasn't sure how she was going to survive that long. The waiting was torture. Amaka barely ate, barely slept. Every time her phone buzzed, she jumped, terrified that it was Emeka, or worse, Chinedu. She had nightmares almost every night, dreams where Chinedu screamed at her, her children turned against her, and she was left alone, abandoned by everyone she loved. But Chinedu, he was happier than ever. He went about his life like nothing had changed, smiling more than usual, even taking her out to dinner one evening. It unnerved her how calm he was, as if he knew something that she didn't know. Finally, the day came when the results were ready. Chinedu received the call from the clinic and smiled at her. "The results are in, Amaka. Let us open it together." Amaka's heart pounded as she sat across from him in the living room. The kids were in their rooms, oblivious to the storm brewing downstairs. Chinedu opened the envelope slowly, almost teasingly, as if he was enjoying the moment. He looked at the paper, his eyes scanning the results, and then he looked up at her with a confused expression. "They are mine," he said slowly, his eyebrows raised. "All of them. All the children are mine." Amaka stared at him, her mind racing. How? How could that be possible? She had been so sure. Her hands started to shake, and without thinking, she burst into tears. "Chinedu, I have to tell you something." Chinedu's expression didn't change. He just sat there, watching her with the same calm, controlled demeanor he always had. "I have been lying to you," she confessed, her voice breaking. "I have been unfaithful. Those children, they are not yours. They belong to someone else. They belong to Emeka, my high school sweetheart." Chinedu didn't react the way she expected. There was no anger, no shock, no yelling. Instead, he chuckled. A low, cold sound that sent a chill down Amaka's spine. Is that all? He asked, leaning back in his chair. Amaka froze. What did he mean, is that all? Then, with a smirk, Chinedu leaned forward and dropped a bombshell of his own. I have known about your affair for years, Amaka. I have been waiting for you to come clean. Her mind was spinning. What do you mean you've known? Chinedu's smirk widened. I had my suspicions for a long time. I had my own DNA test done before this one. I already knew the results. Amaka felt like the ground was falling away beneath her feet. Then why did you? Because, Chinedu said, his eyes gleaming with a cold satisfaction. I wanted to see how long you would lie to me. And while you were busy with your own little secrets, I had some of my own. Amaka's heart pounded in her chest. What secret? She whispered, afraid of the answer. As if on cue, the doorbell rang. Amaka turned, her heart pounding, as her sister Chioma walked in. In her arms was a baby that looked just like Chinedu. Chinedu leaned back, his voice calm, almost cheerful. Meet my son, he said. Amaka's world shattered in that moment. She couldn't speak, couldn't breathe. Chioma, her own sister. But Chinedu wasn't done yet. I've been having an affair with your sister for years, he said casually. You thought you were the only one with secrets? Think again. Amaka felt like she was going to faint. Her whole world had come crashing down in a matter of minutes. Everything she thought she knew was a lie. Her marriage, her family, her children. It was all destroyed. Amaka's vision blurred as the weight of Chinedu's words hit her like a tidal wave. Her own sister? The betrayal cut deeper than anything she had ever imagined. She stumbled back, feeling the walls closing in on her, struggling to process the devastating truth. Amaka felt the world crumbling around her. She had just confessed her deepest secret, expecting an explosion of anger. But Chinedu barely reacted. So all these years you knew, Amaka whispered, barely able to get the words out of her mouth. Chinedu's smile faded as he leaned forward. I knew, Amaka. I've known for a long time, but I didn't care. In the end, I got what I wanted. Her stomach turned. What do you mean? Chinedu stood up, walking slowly around the room as if he was thinking about how to put it into words. You see, I've known about your affair for years, Chinedu said, his voice calm, almost too calm. But the funny thing is, I wasn't going to leave you, Amaka. I wanted to stay married because, well, it just worked. We both had our own secrets. Amaka's hands trembled. She couldn't believe what she was hearing. Chioma, her own sister, had been with her husband for years, and Chinedu had known about her affair all along. She had thought she was playing him, but in reality, they had both been playing each other. But the DNA test, the children, Amaka stammered, still confused. Chinedu stopped pacing and turned and looked at her, a strange look of satisfaction on his face. The DNA test has confirmed that the children are mine. They are mine. I have always known that they were mine. Amaka's heart pounded in her chest as her mind raced to process what he was saying. Why? Why would you go through all the DNA drama if you knew? Chinedu smiled, but it was a cold, distant smile. Because, Amaka, I wanted you to suffer. You see, I don't need revenge in the way you think. I just wanted you to feel the fear, the anxiety, the sleepless nights. I wanted you to feel exactly what I felt when I first found out. Amaka's knees nearly buckled. All this time, she had been trapped in her own nightmare, not realizing that Chinedu had been behind it all. He had set her up, letting her drown in her guilt and terror, while he watched from a distance, coldly calculating her downfall. But now, Chinedu continued, his voice turning sharper. We're done. I'm leaving you, Amaka, and I'm taking the kids. And you can stay in the house in Ikeja with your shame. At least I am not throwing you out in the street. Amaka's world shattered in that moment. He was taking the children? No, he couldn't. They were all she had left. No, you can't take them. They are my children, she cried out, rushing toward him. Chinedu grabbed her arms, his face just inches from hers. Watch me. 2 weeks later, Amaka stood at the front of the house, watching as Chinedu drove off with her children in the backseat. She had fought, begged, and even threatened to expose him, but Chinedu's connections in the city were too strong. He had won custody of the children. As the car disappeared from view, Amaka felt the tears sting her eyes, but she refused to let them fall. She had lost everything: her husband, her children, her sister's betrayal, but she wasn't defeated. There was still one thing Chinedu didn't know. She knew that he had forged the DNA test results. In the chaos of the last few weeks, Amaka had found a hidden message on her phone, an anonymous tip from the DNA testing lab. It seemed someone had tampered with the test results. She now knew the truth, but it was too late. Chinedu had taken everything from her, and even though the children weren't his, he had stolen them as well. Amaka clutched her phone tightly. There would be a day of reckoning, and this time she would be the one plotting. And Chinedu did not know what was coming. Oh, he had no idea. He would suffer for what he had done, and so would her sister. Amaka thought to herself, even if it is the last thing I do, I will make you suffer, Chinedu, and you, Chioma, as well. Make sure you come back next week for the part 2 of this story, where Amaka would unleash her revenge plan. Trust me, you don't want to miss it. So be sure to like this video and subscribe to the channel so you'll be notified when part 2 comes out next week. Deception is a dangerous game. The more you play, the more tangled the web becomes until there's no way out. But in the end, the truth will always find a way to emerge, no matter how hard you try to bury it. What do you think Amaka's revenge would be? What do you think she would do to Chinedu and her sister Chioma? Let us know your thoughts in the comments below, and be sure to come back next week for the part 2 of the story. Thank you so much for watching, for liking the video, for leaving your comments, and for subscribing. Make sure you come back next week when we finish this story. See you next week, and God bless you.